Welcome to the Worldshapers, conversations with authors about their latest books. I'm your host, Edward Willett, and this episode's guest, Ryan Melsom, talking about his new cyberpunk thriller, Gods of a New World. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Worldshapers, the podcast where I talk to other authors about their latest books. I say other authors because I am myself an author. My name is Edward Willett, and I am the award-winning author of more than 60 books of science fiction, fantasy, and nonfiction for readers of all ages. That's my little usual plug there. And in fact, I have a new book which just came out on June 24th. I happen to have it here. It is a modern day middle grade / young adult fantasy novel called Fireboy. Very briefly, the girl that you see there, Samantha, she missed out on a field trip with her grade 7 science class just the previous school year. We're now in the summertime. And something happened on that trip. The bus was found overturned with the teacher, who's also the driver, unconscious. And another girl in the back of the bus was also unconscious, kind of hidden under a lot of camping equipment that had fallen on her tents and sleeping bags and stuff. And then all of a sudden, one of the boys who was on that ill-fated field trip shows up looking like this, made out of fire. And she was a very good friend of the main character here. And working with the girl who survived the field trip, she tries to figure out what's going on, where these kids are, and why this one in particular has suddenly shown up made entirely out of fire. So Fireboy, that's the title. So that's out now, and I hope you'll check it out. It's had some really good reviews, and I certainly enjoyed writing it, and I think you younger readers and even older readers should enjoy reading it as well. Other recent book from Shadowpaw Press, and I should mention that was published by my own publishing company, Shadowpaw Press. The other one I really want to mention before we get to today's featured book is Shapers of Worlds Volume 5. This is the 5th anthology featuring science fiction and fantasy short stories by authors who were guests of this podcast. This will be the last one because although I'm still talking to a lot of science fiction and fantasy authors, I'm not just talking to science fiction and fantasy authors anymore. And also, I'm not quite as regular with the podcast. It's a bit more hit or miss. So I decided that 5 was it's not a round number, but it's a nice number to, and I do make, in the preface, I do make mention of the 5-year mission. So 5 is a nice number in science fiction and fantasy. So anyway, that's out now. Shapers of Worlds, Volume 5. And again, that's from Shadowpaw Press. Shadowpaw Press is my own publishing company. It's a member of Literary Press Group and of Canada and the Association of Canadian Publishers, traditional publishing company, royalty-paying publishing company. And I have a lot of authors. I put out way too many books last year, but I'm continuing to put out some this year. There's other new titles coming up. The Night Girl, which is a reprint of a quite well-known urban fantasy set in Toronto that came out a few years ago by James Bow. And then I have literary stuff coming out this fall. I have a new poetry collection by Glenn Sorstad, Saskatchewan's first poet laureate, and the first government poet laureate in Canada, actually. He's one of the elder statesmen of Canadian poetry. And then a short fiction collection by Betty Jane Hegarat, a Calgary author, and a reprint of my own book through my Endless Sky Books imprint, Magebane, written by Lee Arthur Chane, which is one of my pseudonyms. It was originally published by Daw Books, and so this is a new edition, and the first time it's been out in trade paperback. So looking forward to that coming out as well. And then in the new year, there's another literary novel called The Laundryman, which is kind of a historical murder mystery tale set in Prince Albert in the late 19th century. And another fantasy novel, title still being determined, by Jenna Green, who's an Alberta author. And then next spring, I have Robert J. Sawyer's sequel to his very popular book, The Downloaded, which I published last year. So I'm looking forward to bringing that out. It's called Gods in the Machine. But today we are going to be talking to Ryan Melsom. Ryan Melsom is the author of this book, which just came out as this podcast goes live, Gods of a New World. And I will read the bio from the back of the book, which is why I have to put on my glasses. I always take them off for the actual interview so I look younger, but really, I do need them. Ryan Melsom, here we go. Ryan Melsom has never stopped dreaming about new ways he could get ideas out of his head and into the world. He holds a PhD in literature from Queen's University and has long been fascinated with the interplay among culture, technology, spirituality, spaces, and human nature. Through the years, he has explored these topics through numerous creative media, including 2 previous works of fiction, academic writing, experimental web spaces, music projects, and a black belt in karate. He grew up in Kamloops, British Columbia, and now lives in Ottawa with his wife and 2 boys. So that's today's guest, and let's talk to Ryan now. So, Ryan, welcome to the Worldshapers.
Thank you. It's a
Yeah, I
pleasure to be
always
here.
I always look for connections, but it's pretty easy to find the connection here since Shadowpaw Press, my publishing company, is publishing the book we're going to be talking about.
Mhm.
And the way we got to know each other was is kind of different too, because my wife is an engineer and you work with engineers, and that was where
I
the
do.
connection came from.
Yeah. Never would have called that.
No, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So we'll start with, as I always say, it's like the sound of music that start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. Let's start with you. Where
Right.
did you grow up, and how did you get interested in telling stories and writing and all that good stuff?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I grew up in British Columbia, in Kamloops, British Columbia, which is a small town in the interior of BC. And yeah, it's kind of a funny region. It's a desert, semi-arid region, and so you've got rattlesnakes and cacti and sagebrush, which are not typically things you'd expect to see in Canada. Um, I've moved really all over the country. So I lived on the BC coast. I've lived in Ontario, and I keep moving back and forth because my wife's from out here and I'm from out there. So yeah, I guess that's sort of the in terms of where I've been, but in terms of how I got interested in writing, my goodness, it was quite a strange process. So I'd watched some of the other excellent guests on your show, Ed, and I heard there were a lot of readers, but for me, the I wasn't as much of a reader. I ended up doing literature degrees, so the reading got in there eventually. But for me, it was all about Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. It was about it was about shoot 'em up 80s action heroes and these crazy worlds that they found themselves. One of the funny things in Arnold movies that actually really became relevant, to the book that we'll talk about today and stuff is it's always about the little guy who is facing this overwhelming odds, just this massive sort of usually mega corporate kind of entities, and they're just trying to squash down any form of resistance or any thinking that goes against them. And so I like that narrative. It must have embedded itself kind of in my subconscious somehow. Even going back further, the first movie I ever watched in the theater was E.T. I was about 5 years old and I watched it with my mom. And again, it's about like the little guy or the little person, somehow pushing against these overwhelming forces. E.T. I watched it again with my son recently, and it has this the adults are just this sort of mysterious force that kind of do things, and then there's a very central kind of narrative. So yeah, that became a big thing. Sci-fi, I always loved sci-fi. I love Star Wars. I love Star Trek. I don't see a need to differentiate or have a preference on those. I love anything with worlds. The Matrix, Blade Runner, all of these just kind of. I just collected these over and over, and then eventually I did start to read a lot of literature. I read. Stephen King was my first love, and still I have immense respect. I don't read his books as much anymore, but that definitely worked its way in. Kurt Vonnegut, and then it was Douglas Copeland in my 20s, and sort of maybe fairly cliche figures in some ways, but all this sort of started to assemble itself into sensibilities, I guess, that were both literary but also really deeply embedded in pop culture. I like that. I like pop culture as as material for exploration of who we are as human beings, and how we try to work through the deeper questions in life and all that stuff. So I think you can learn plenty from Coca-Cola ads and I don't know, Starbucks coffee. You can learn maybe more than you can from reading Dostoevsky and Proust or something like that. So
Well, I think the distinction between pop culture and and just culture is a very recent phenomenon, really. I
Yeah,
mean, when Shakespeare was writing, he was writing pop culture,
100%.
and yet now he's another
Absolutely.
great
Yeah.
literary
Yeah.
icon that he is. And the same with Dickens and people like that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Definitely.
so why did you end up? Because you ended up with a PhD, no less,
I
in
did.
in English literature, is it?
Yeah. Yeah. Canadian literature specifically. Yeah.
So why?
Why? Yeah. I never had a good answer to that one from my parents, but so okay. Well, I had a little bit of a strange upbringing. I was just raised in like sort of a semi cult kind of environment, growing up, and it. But it gave me such a skewed picture of the world, and so eventually I did end up going off to university, and I don't disparage the experiences I had as a young person. I think that it's all sort of enriching, and it's sort of what you do with it, or where you take it in your life. But anyway, I went off to university and took a bunch of courses. I didn't know what I wanted to do at all. And so I thought, oh, I'll be a teacher because that's, I guess that's what 18-year-olds who don't know what they want to do decide, that's a valid career. Um, I took a bunch of stuff in the arts and the humanities. I took history and philosophy. I took a little bit of geography and a few other things like that. But I found actually literature to be the most challenging course. I got my worst marks in literature, and that annoyed me to no end. So
Well,
I took that and decided
maybe
to push
teach you
it.
French if that was the criteria.
Oh, I gave up on French. Yeah, but I like the challenge because I felt like there was some sort of mystery at the core of literature. When you read Shakespeare or something like that, there's some way of understanding who we are as humans there that's just fascinating to me. And so that compelled me, and it compelled me, and my grades got better and better because I was so interested and engaged in it. It was never expected. Nobody in my family graduated from university, college and stuff, but I took uh, oh yeah, like how I got onto the path of grad school and all that stuff is I was flipping through the calendar in third year of university, and there's something called an honors degree. I'm like, well, that sounds even tougher than the things I'm doing, and so that's the one I went to. And then I tried to work for a bit after university. I ended up being a salesperson at an electronics store, big electronics retail chain, which was just the most soul draining thing. So I was like, that's not what I want to do.
I don't
And
know
then
if
I
you
and
are
then I yeah.
didn't know there's a musical called Avenue Q, which is famous because it's a puppet musical.
Okay.
It's an adult puppet musical.
Yeah.
But there's a song in there called "What Do You Do with a Degree in English?"
And that was most definitely the question I was asking. So I eventually went back to school. I went to Queens. I got a master's there. Met some incredible professors, and was encouraged to keep going with it. And yeah, Canadian literature specifically, I don't know. For some reason it just made sense to me. I got really interested in apocalypse too, probably because of my kind of strange beginnings and my childhood stuff, and went from there. Wrote a dissertation on apocalypse in the west coast of North America. Very wide ranging, overly ambitious, it was called by some, kind of multi-century exploration of this theme of just the idea of blowing up paradise. Basically, that was the core question that I was asking. Why does everybody want to blow up paradise, including Arnold, among others?
So when did you actually start writing for publication?
Yeah, so for publication, so I did write a very terrible novel after my undergrad degree. I actually wrote
As we all do.
several attempts at books. It's a thing. Like all the writers just chuckle at it. And they're like, oh yeah, we know that book. But yeah, I tried a few things when I was a kid. There was something compelling to me about the idea of I would always see worlds. I would see like places, and these kind of richly detailed places, and so I was always trying to describe what I saw. I'm very visual in my thinking, and the way that I imagine things, and so I was always trying to just do that. So that goes way back. But in terms of when I started to publish, so after grad school, I wrote a couple kind of experimental literary novels. Tried to shop them around. I have, the stack of rejection letters from that wonderful experience. Just form letters. I had, one or two nibbles, but nothing ever went further than that. So I decided to self-publish. I was sort of exploring my career options and what I could do. I learned a lot about like just everything from like book layout to like kerning fonts and things like that. So really, all the specifics there. I self-published 2 books. One was called No Generation, and it was a book about. It was inspired by the Occupy Wall Street movement, because what I liked about that movement was it was a wildly diverse and heterogeneous kind of thing that happened. People from all different kinds of interests were getting together, and they collectively felt something needed to be changed about the way that the world was headed. But they didn't say like, we all have to see this the same way, or we all have to approach this the same way. So I like that kind of idea. And so that book is 96 individual stories, sort of loosely thematically related, and they overlap in terms of some big things, but there's no like real structure or core narrative that drives that one. Clickbait, which was the other one I wrote, was about a bunch of kids in Los Angeles, completely lost, world without meaning, a world that actively resists the idea of meaning, and trying to navigate their way into some kind of sense of like who they are or where they belong in the world. And again, like that one draws really heavily on pop culture stuff, and they're kind of using stuff like social media to, I don't know, construct a spiritual identity and all that
I read
stuff.
that
So,
one. I read it. So,
oh yeah, and I appreciate it. You're one of the few, Ed.
well, okay. So let's. In your day job, as I mentioned, you work with engineers. So you're in
Yeah.
Ottawa now.
Yeah.
What exactly is your title? I don't actually know what your title is at Engineers Canada.
Oh, I have a very long title. I actually have 2 titles. So I'm the Manager of Qualifications and Secretary to the Canadian Engineering Qualifications Board.
Oh, that
So,
calls for a
yeah.
big business card.
I usually shorten it just to Manager of Qualifications. So yeah, we support a largely like international folks coming to Canada who have engineering backgrounds. They need to figure out some way to assess, what their backgrounds is and whether they're qualified to become engineers in Canada. So,
and of course, my wife was on the qualifications board, so that's how
she
you
was.
knew
She
her,
was
and then I
a
met you. And,
superstar, a chair.
yeah, well, and I got to tag along to meetings as well, so that was always fun. I didn't go to the meetings,
for me
but
too.
I tag along to interesting.
I got to talk to somebody literary when I was at those meetings.
So let's talk about the new book. It's called.
Yep.
I don't know why I keep trying to change the title. At one point, it's called Gods of a New World.
Yeah.
A couple of times I've registered it as Gods of a New Tomorrow.
Yeah.
And
that one.
and most recently I put something out and I called it Ghosts of a New World. But I know the reason for that one. It's because Robert J. Sawyer's next book coming out next spring is called Ghosts in the Machine.
There we go.
I just got the two mixed up in my head. But it's called Gods of a New World. You don't happen to have a copy handy, do you? I have a box of them downstairs, but I forgot.
Yeah, I have a box of them downstairs too.
Well, the cover will be on the website anyway. So
sure.
Because we just got the print copies, and it will be. I think this will go live. I was going to say the 27th, but I think it'll be the weekend after that. So this will go live. Just the book will be out, so you can talk about it in the sense that it is actually out there for people to read and purchase. So where did this come from? And well, first of all, maybe give a description of it. I mean, I could give a description of it, but you'll give a better one. So
I don't know. You're pretty good at those descriptions, but okay. So it's a cyberpunk science fiction novel. And cyberpunk, I picture kind of the tagline for cyberpunk is high tech, low life. So, it's a very high tech world. It's set in the near future, but we're talking about everyday people, and it's got a very gritty ground level kind of feel to a lot of the book. So in this near future, there are a set of trillionaires, a group of people who are kind of all powerful. They have massive data empires that they can get really any information about anybody on Earth, and have kind of this omniscient view of what humanity is doing. They have endless resources. They can buy anything. They can make any plan or project happen. And then, they also have hyper intelligent AIs, so these are just minor extensions of really, some things that might be fairly familiar to the world today, and just kind of pushing it a little bit further ahead. So, they are really in many ways kind of all powerful. And they can, there's all sorts of like life extension and body modification at the almost like genetical or physiological level. The boundaries of kind of being bounded are completely becoming flexible and fluid for these folks. So they start to think of themselves as gods, and they start to sort of half jokingly call themselves gods in the press and kind of play into this image and mess around with this. But they actually have a plan that goes deeper than that. And what they would like to do next, they've kind of won all the games that there are to be won. They are the capitalist overlords, or the, just the most powerful people, put it that way, in the world. Money is not even really an object for these people anymore. It has nothing to do with that. But so they decide that they're going to embed themselves right into the fabric of reality and control reality at the molecular or, even submolecular level. Basically, embed their consciousness so that they can create at will, at whim, and do kind of anything. So this is sort of end game for free will and individuality of the human species. We are just material in this scheme that they want. So there's a couple of very unlikely allies. You use that phrase, Ed, and I've been using it ever since, but, unlikely allies. So there's a dude named James Kessler's, late 20s, which is probably where I mentally picture myself for some unknown reason, as my hair is sitting here gray. And
I always think of myself as about 18, but
yeah. Anyway, this is somebody whose mindset I get, but he had a bit of a rough background. So there was something in the novel, in the world of the novel, called the Bad Times. It was really a societal collapse. Everybody talks about AI taking everybody's jobs away and wiping out the middle class, all this stuff. So in the novel, I kind of picture what that might look like. There's really kind of nothing for anybody except for like the most elite, kind of most wealthy people in the world. So he survived this. His parents didn't, and he ended up raising his little sister Sarah from a very young age. And so he's come out the other side of it. The world is healed somewhat. The gods decided that they were going to help rebuild society, use technologies to develop, mass housing, provide like all kinds of services and food, and just sort of jumpstart humanity, which was really kind of teetering on the brink.
Kind of that age of abundance thing.
Absolutely, yeah. So sort of post apocalyptic in a way, and sort of in a kind of rebuilding stage there. So James, having had this ridiculous past, or this kind of terrible, I should say, past, not ridiculous, but he's decided he wants to like.
Should mention he has a great love of 80s movies.
Yes, he does. Yeah. I can't imagine where that came from. But so he's decided he just wants to like lay low. Like, he is happy, he's got a job, he's safe, he's fed. His sister, survived with him thanks to his like kind of heroic efforts. And that's one of the themes I play with a lot, is this idea of like the everyday hero. Like, these are not people who are like Arnold, who can just blast their way through any problem. These are real people, or real characters, realistic people. I don't know. But anyway, so that's James, and there's kind of two protagonists. So the other one, the other unlikely ally, is Maree Shell. So Maree Shell has come from a completely different background. She has lived a life of privilege. She got to stay behind those very high walls and those very, thick security forces, and kind of walk through life, breeze through life without any real problems. I mean, she's a human being. Things have happened to her. Her dog died. Her dad died. And that becomes, particularly her dad, becomes relevant as the novel goes on. But she hasn't had too much to worry about, and she kind of floats through life. So like, AI kind of takes care of all her problems. There's a line, that she's automated $50 million budgets in her sleep. She's basically, the world is made for Maree Shell. But there's an incident early in the novel. There's an assassination for one of her close friends, Athena, and she ends up questioning, like, could she have died? And she's faced with something real in her life, maybe for the first time. And so, and then it goes from there. And so, yeah. So I can't remember where we started that question. I got too much into talking about the characters.
Just a synopsis. whatever
Yes,
you
yeah.
want to
Okay,
do
okay.
without
So
giving
yeah,
away the
so that
story.
sets the stage. Yeah. So yeah, these gods who have big plans for the world. James and Marie stumble across their plans, and they feel like this is abhorrent on some level. And they want to they feel that they should try to do something about it, but they're not those action heroes of the 80s. These are real people, and they're not, they don't know how to kind of blast their way through every problem. And so from there, they attempt to confront the gods, and or maybe not confront directly, but attempt to orchestrate a plan to do something about this. They pull in a whole wide variety of very other unlikely allies from across particularly James's background, but also Marie's, and they push against it. But that's where the fun begins, because once the gods start to clue in that somebody's trying to mess with their plans, these people are not, they don't take no for an answer. And it gets very heated from there. Shall
And
we
your
say?
gods, I mean, self-consciously, I'm sure, but
Yeah,
they have styled themselves and in a way are kind of modern versions of the Greek pantheon.
they
So you have
are. Yeah,
Athena and you have Hephaestus and all those sorts
yeah.
of the characters. And I found that interesting because that's something, partly because my daughter was a huge Percy Jackson fan. I really
Oh
got
yeah,
into
there we go.
it.
It
And she
keeps on
started,
working itself in.
yeah, that's
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting aspect of it as well. All right. So how did this all come about? Why, you wrote it, but why? This is the where
Yeah.
do you get your ideas from question.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. It came from a bunch of different places. So one place was I had a more experimental plan, something I wanted to do with modern day gods. I was trying to think things like, like if Amazon was a god, what would the nature of that god be? Or if, Trumpism was a god, what would the nature of that god be? Just huge sort of societal forces and what that would be. But I didn't really get going on ideas for that. And I knew that I wanted to write something a little more kind of engaging and popular. Um, so that was kind of one piece. Another is just like the science fiction thing. So I think for years I was super intimidated by science fiction fans. They are such a brainy bunch, and they're very detail oriented, meticulous. And I've heard the debunkings of every single Star Trek movie, and, and it's like it's a scary crowd to write for in some ways. But I think ultimately I was more kind of just inspired by my own love of it, and throw caution to the wind. And I'm sure that I will be take it apart in terms of the AI representation and all that stuff in various ways. But I think that for me, like, what drove the interest really there was just AI is not just a kind of tool. It's not just this technical thing. It has huge, as we know, like huge social impacts and societal impacts. And so that's the dimension I'm interested in. I'm interested in some ways as AI is like a metaphor, or as a force in the world. So that became part of it. And that gave me a pathway, if we're thinking of modern day gods, well, this is the way that these gods gain power in some ways, is through AI. And then the other bit that I had sort of kicked around, I was thinking of writing like, so there's like cyberpunk novels, like I think of like Blade Runner maybe as like the text, like the sort of like inaugural. I'm sure there's so much more, but
Well,
like that's
fiction-wise, of course, it's Neuromancer with William Gibson.
yes, yeah,
on
yeah,
on the
yeah, yeah,
BlueSky.
absolutely, yeah. And then yeah, like it just sort of building. Like I had just a fascination with that, like gritty, highly technological, and all that stuff. And so, but I wanted to write it from the perspective of like suburbia. So like the cyberpunk is always like you're in the city, you're right in the heart of things. But like this novel starts off with James basically sitting in his backyard sipping a beer at the end of a vacation and just like looking out at the city. He doesn't want to be part of the city at all, really. And so those are a couple ideas that came together. Obviously, the explosion of ChatGPT and Grok and other things in the last few years fed into that becoming more and more like prominent, and people thinking more and more about how that's going to change things for everybody. So yeah.
Now, what is your process when you're writing? Do you do a detailed outline, or do you just start writing, or do you do a lot of preliminary work? How do you work? And where do you
Yeah.
work? You have a full
Yeah.
time job, so
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a few questions there. So The first thing is I learned a term, and you would know that. All the writers seem to know this. I'm sure you're familiar, but pantser. I'm definitely a pantser.
Answers and
Apparently,
plotters, yes.
I'm a
Although
pantser.
some people prefer the term "I'm a discovery writer" as
I
opposed to
discover.
pantser. I think that's maybe sounds a little better. One of the funny things about Pantser is that I used to do, speaking of AI, I used to do
Yeah.
auto-generated transcripts of these. It was too much work and I gave up, but because it took so much correction of what the
Yeah.
transcript did. But
Yeah.
it invariably turned Panzer into Panzer, like the German
Oh,
tank. So you'd have
yeah.
an author saying, "Yeah, I'm a Panzer." Anyway,
Which
so
is, I
you're a
think,
Panzer.
yeah. There's a Hardwired, the cyberpunk novel Hardwired has Panzer tanks in it. There's some sort of futuristic version of the old ones, but anyway,
You can have Panzer
where
tanks
was it?
that make things up as
Yes,
they go
I'm a
along.
pantser. Yeah, I'm a pantser. So one thing I do is I start cooking ideas like years in advance. Like I just get a feeling, it's a semi-mystical thing, honestly, but something like that god's idea. Like I had this idea like 4 or 5 years ago of just like modern day
It's the
gods.
muse tapping you on the corner. Speaking of Greek
Yeah,
gods,
well, exactly. Yeah. And so I listen to it. And so what I start to do is just assemble from there. I just pull in things, ideas, but I think because I tried to force a few projects when I was younger, and just see those really kind of be very flat, and like particularly that one I wrote after undergrad. It's a great idea. It was about like Elvis was going to be a spirit guide for this guy who just graduated from university. But anyway, pitch, no, no, but it was not a good book. But yeah, so what I did was I kind of refused to start writing the books until it absolutely has to start being written, and in terms of like the pantser and plotter thing, when it comes to characters, they always start generic for me, but I have this like unconscious thing that I know is there with them. And so they start off like I'll use like Jeff. Jeff is the name of every single character, male character when I start a book, and Jeff and Susie or whatever. And then they become kind of who they are based on the world and all that. So that's a bit about the process. In terms of where I write, I always write in my Three Seasons room if I can, but I live in Ottawa and there's like a 2 to 3 month window of where I can actually comfortably write outside. So I also have a little nook in the basement, and I have various artifacts, Malcolm Lowry novels lining it. Malcolm Lowry is one of my all-time favorites, and my PhD sits there in the basement with me, and I look at that. If I'm ever like, you can do this, you can do something anyway. So yeah, so that's a bit about it. And when I write, I use the Stephen King method from On Writing. I swear by it. I tell everybody, read that book.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, he's the master. He's written all the books. He's written so many books, and obviously, like one of the most successful writers of all time, really. And so I'm like, I don't know anything. He knows something. I'm gonna just listen to him and do what he tells me. So in that book, he talks about a process. Find a place to write. So I talked a bit about my places. Write 1,000 words a day and do it for 3 months. And that's exactly what I did. And that's 90,000 words. And that's enough for like a substantial manuscript. And, I'm not overly precious about it. I write absolute garbage, many days, but I do really try to stick to my 1,000 words. I produced three manuscripts in the last 2 years, and I'm about a third of the way through another one. So it's something's working there.
So once you have that initial draft, which of course is a mess,
Yep.
what's your revision process look like?
Yeah. So again, Stephen King, like you might as well just like I could just read the book to you,
Over here somewhere.
but so he says set it aside for 6 weeks and start a different project. So that's what I did. That's how I ended up writing, these extra manuscripts. I was just started off with one, but they keep on filling in the gaps. So set it aside for 6 weeks, then revisit it and do a read through. And in his quote, I think is, fix any plot holes that you could drive a truck through. So I do that. I go through one revision process. I try to get some beta readers. My incredible wife is, my most patient reader, has read many things in many states. But for Gods, I actually had a group of 4 other friends as well who took a look at it and provided incredible feedback on that. I'm going to mention my name, Kellyanne, Joachim, David, and Chris. Thank you very much. You're also in the acknowledgements. But yeah, so that leads to a set of revisions that I have to kind of collate, put together, and I felt like by that point it's like I'm not smart enough to get it any further. I need, that's when I had it, reached out to you, Ed, and I know you'd read Clickbait, and you were. I'm super grateful that you were receptive to taking a look at the manuscript, and we went from there. And that was only like 2 years ago. So
Yeah.
there's a big process and more edits many times after that. But
And I
yeah.
move fast compared to most publishers.
Honestly, I can't even, I'm just astounded at the sort of output of Shadowpaw Press. It's
Yeah,
incredible.
me too.
Yeah.
It's actually ramping down because last year was
Yeah.
over 20 books, which is
Yeah.
insane for one person.
Yeah.
And I have to ramp down, and so. But yeah, but you're coming out, where you are out when this comes out.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing some good pre-sales on Amazon, and pretty good. I mean, I'm a tiny publisher, but by my standards, it's pretty good pre-sales to bookstores. And
Yeah.
Chapters Indigo even did a promotion for a week as one of their anticipated science fiction titles for this year.
That was
So
super exciting. I couldn't believe that.
25% off. I don't no way to know how many people took advantage of that. But,
Yeah.
at least it was out there. So
Yeah.
yeah. So how do you what do you hope readers will get out of this book?
Yeah. So I guess coming back to the theme of like everyday people sort of facing absolutely overwhelming, like, um, godlike kind of, forces shaping the world. Um, I think I would love it if people read this and felt like they could do something, that there is something to be done in the world, that we're not just sort of now in this like slow train wreck towards like doom of the human species, and AI is going to take everything and everybody's going to be left with scraps. And I mean, there's the bad times in the novel, and they're not good times. Like there's I try to maintain some realism about the truths of where the world's at and where it might be headed, but that's really the main thing. I mean, I think that I did have a short-lived career as like a university instructor, and one thing that I realized there it was that one of my strengths is actually like helping other people find their voice and giving voice to them, and so that's something that I think is embedded in some way in this book. Yeah, I would say that that's probably the big thing. I mean, I think it's a lot of fun. It's a very diverse cast of characters. I think a lot of people could potentially see themselves in aspects of this novel, and that it's a wild ride for everything from like kind of the most kind of sincere and kind-hearted people to like the utterly most cynical people I could possibly imagine. There are characters here who are just barely human, shall we say, call themselves gods, but barely human. And there's a few of the gods too who are extremely complex and interesting and more sort of likable, if complicated characters and things like that. So yeah, I think just that.
Yeah, I don't want to give anything away, but I will say that the ending may not be what people expect. So.
Yep, I thought about it for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are you working on now? You said you have other manuscripts in the works.
Yeah. So I guess I can. So I had 3 books. I'll give like a one-line version of 2, and I'll talk a little about the one that I'm working on right now. So one is a gothic medieval apocalypse where there's demonic forces invading the world, and people from competing belief systems have to come together. And these are radically different belief systems. So you've got like a witch, you've got like a Eastern monk, like some sort of Buddhist monk or something like that. You've got a priest. You've got a Arabic king who is very much a scientist, and so trying to like somehow assemble against, like, again, overwhelming odds. I love it. I'm probably never going to give it up, but so there's that one. And there's an evil character called the High Demoness who has big plans for the world. She thinks the world's had it too easy for too long. The other one is set in about 2100. It's another cyberpunk style novel. Basically, there's a demon lord an ancient demon lord who has discovered a way to control and sort of leech the life force of humanity through our devices. I can't, imagine where that came up, but anyway, and is there's
Feel it
again
being
like
beached right now. So.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So to be honest, part of the inspiration for that was sitting there looking at my computer, like doom scrolling. And I'm just like, there's like, this is the worst. And I hate this. And yet somehow I'm compelled to keep doing this. And it's like this like sort of chain. So it's just sort of slightly metaphorizing that, or turning that into a metaphor a bit with this demon lord. And again, some fairly average, well, talented but average folks who try to do something about this. One of the fun things about that one is, as they descend towards this demon lord, they actually go through Dante's 9 circles of hell and have to overcome kind of each layer of human, I don't know what, foible, sin. Sin's a weird word, but they go through lust, they go through wrath, they go through envy and greed and all that kind of stuff, and work their way through in creative ways. I wouldn't say it's overly mechanical or like super wedded to like rigid adherence to Dante, but that's sort of what helped structure that book. And then the one I'm working on right now is it's a quantum apocalypse, where basically people's views of the world become so divergent that they stop intersecting, and reality starts to decohere as a result of this. And I'm thinking a lot of political situation in the world, and this fact that people end up in echo chambers, they stop talking, and so I just kind of push that a little harder and see, and then the world itself starts to break apart. It's a very, I didn't want it to be a horror book, but it has a horror feel because the protagonists will like slip into other worlds where something is horribly wrong, or they'll encounter like a doppelganger of themselves, some clearly kind of evil version, and these things just are starting to sort of shift in and out of reality, and so they're getting pulled into what might be the source of this, or what might be causing it at this point. But still got a lot of writing to do on that one.
And where can people keep up with you online?
So I'm mostly on BlueSky. That's I really like that platform. I find there's a very active and engaged community on there. So I also I have a Facebook page, which is I use a fair bit and just sort of share news through there. I do have an Instagram, and I have an older blog, which when I'm wildly successful, internationally acclaimed writer, raking in my Hugo and Nebula awards, then I'll start working on my blog again. It's there, and I think the writing was worth preserving in some form, and I occasionally
You can get
revisit
an
it.
AI to write it for you at that point.
Yeah,
So.
well, exactly, right? I don't even need to think at all anymore.
And do you have a website?
So the website is the blog, but it's just ryanmelsom.com.
Okay. Well, I'll put all these links on the web page when I finish this up.
Fabulous.
Well, thanks so much, Ryan, for coming on. And as I said, the book will be out when this comes out. So anybody watching this that would like to buy it, or 20 or 30 copies for friends, whatever, you can
Teach in
do so.
your university classes.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's
the
all sorts of
possibilities are endless here.
possibilities there. So thanks so much, and best of luck
Thank
with
you.
it. Best of luck to me too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
thanks for being on.
thanks for having me on the show, and thank you for everything, everything with the amazing work you do with Shadowpaw.
Thank you. Bye for now. So thanks again to Ryan for being on. That was a great conversation, and I'm very excited that Gods of a New World is now out, and I do urge you to seek out a copy. It's available everywhere. Wherever you like to buy books, you can find it in print or in ebook. That's it for this episode of The Worldshapers. Just a few things to remind you of before I sign off. First of all, you can find The Worldshapers online at theworldshapers.com, where you will find a webpage for every author that I've interviewed, with more information about the book and about them, and links to the audio version of this as well. If you're watching it on YouTube, well, it's the only place you're watching it. If you're seeing this on YouTube, you can also just listen to the audio version. And if you're listening to the audio version, you can also find it on YouTube if you'd like to see what I look like. I don't know why you would, but it's possible. So that's theworldshapers.com. You can also find the Worldshapers on X at the Worldshapers, and on Facebook at the Worldshapers. You can find me, Edward Willett, on my own web page, which is Edward Willett website. It's not just a single page. EdwardWillett.com. You can find me on X at eWillett, on Instagram at Edward Willett Author, on Facebook at Edward.Willett, and on YouTube, where you may be watching this, at Edward Willett. YouTube.com/Edward Willett is my channel. Among other things, you can walk around Regina with me sometimes on that channel, because that's something I've been doing for a long time. I think I hit all the important social media ones there. I don't think I missed anything. And finally, Shadowpaw Press, which I've talked about, is easy because I use the same handle for everything. It's shadowpawpress.com. It's on X at Shadowpaw Press, and it's on Instagram at Shadowpaw Press, and on Facebook at Shadowpaw Press. So that one's easy. And again, Shadowpaw Press is the publisher of Gods of a New World, the book we talked about today, and many other fine books by many wonderful authors. So I hope you will check it out as well. That's it for this episode of The Worldshapers. Thanks again for watching and or listening, and I'll be back soon with another exciting author talking about their latest book. That's it for this time. Bye for now. And another one's gone, and another one's gone.